I woke up Tuesday morning to the sound of heavy machinery outside my bedroom window, which was strange considering I lived in a quiet neighborhood in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where the loudest thing was usually Mrs. Henderson's yapping poodle. I stumbled out of bed, pulled on a pair of jeans, and walked to the window to see what the racket was about. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 men in neon vests were operating a small excavator in my backyard, tearing up the ground right through the middle of my carefully cultivated berry patch. I ran outside barefoot, still wearing my old college t-shirt, waving my arms like a madman. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The excavator operator, a burly guy with a thick gray beard, shut off the machine and climbed down. "HOA project, sir. Installing a community walking path. Through my property. Through my berry bushes." He shrugged and pulled out a crumpled paper from his vest pocket. "Says here lot 47, that's you, right? Marcus Freeman?" "Yeah, that's me, but nobody asked me about any path." "Not my problem, buddy. I just follow the work orders." He started climbing back into the excavator. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and started taking pictures. "You need to stop right now. This is my property." "Talk to the HOA," the guy said, firing the machine back up. I stormed back inside, threw on some shoes and a proper shirt, and drove straight to the HOA office located in the clubhouse near the community pool. The entire drive over, I was seething. I had spent 3 years developing that berry patch. 3 years of soil amendments, careful variety selection, pest management, and pruning. I had blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and strawberries all thriving in complementary rows. Harvest was supposed to start in just 2 weeks. The HOA office was a small room attached to the clubhouse, decorated with fake plants and motivational posters about community spirit that now seemed deeply ironic. Behind the desk sat Patricia Whitmore, the HOA board president, a woman in her mid-50s with aggressively highlighted blonde hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Marcus, what brings you in today?" she asked in that syrupy voice she used when she was pretending to care. "Your crew is destroying my berry patch right now." Patricia's smile didn't waver. "Oh yes, the new walking path project. It's going to be lovely, really adds value to the community. You can't just tear up my yard without permission." "Actually, we can." She opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick binder. "According to Section 12, subsection C of the HOA bylaws, the association has the right to implement improvement projects that benefit the community as a whole. The path was approved by the board last month. And it has to go through my berry patch. The path connects the north and south sections of the neighborhood. Your property happens to be in the optimal location." She flipped through some pages. "Besides, according to our landscaping guidelines, residential food gardens are supposed to be limited to a 10 by 10 foot area. Your berry patch is approximately 30 by 40 feet, which puts you in violation anyway." I felt my face getting hot. I've had those berries for 3 years. "Nobody said anything before." "Well, I'm saying something now." Her fake smile finally dropped. "The path construction will be completed by end of week. You'll receive a written notice about bringing your property into compliance within 30 days, or you'll face fines of $100 per day. This is insane. This is community living, Marcus. We all have to make sacrifices for the greater good." I left the office before I said something I'd regret. When I got back home, the crew had already dug a trench about 4 feet wide running straight through the heart of my berry patch. My beautiful blueberry bushes, the ones I had babied through 2 harsh winters, were ripped out and tossed in a pile like garbage. The raspberry canes I had carefully trained along a trellis system were crushed under the excavator's treads. I called my lawyer, a guy named Tom Richardson who had handled my house closing. "They can't do this, right?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "Did you read your HOA bylaws when you bought the house?" I skimmed them. "That's what everyone says." "Look, Marcus, HOAs in North Carolina have pretty broad powers. If it's in the bylaws and they followed proper procedure for the vote, they probably are within their rights. What about my berry bushes? Those took years to establish. You could potentially sue for the value of the plants, but that's going to cost you more in legal fees than you'd recover. HOA litigation is expensive and usually doesn't go the homeowner's way." After hanging up with Tom, I stood in my backyard and watched the crew work. They were fast and efficient, I'd give them that. By late afternoon, they had installed landscaping fabric, gravel base, and were starting to lay flagstone in an attractive herringbone pattern. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the craftsmanship. But all I could see was my destroyed garden. That evening, my neighbor Dave Chen came over with a 6-pack of beer. Dave was a software engineer who worked from home and had been living in the neighborhood longer than I had. He handed me a beer and we sat on my back porch, looking at the destruction. "Patricia pulled the same thing with the Johnsons 3 years ago," Dave said. "They had a vegetable garden she didn't like, found some bylaw violation and made them tear it out. Why didn't anyone warn me?" "The Johnsons moved. People don't stick around after Patricia sets her sights on them." He took a long drink. "She's gotten worse since her husband left her. I think she channels all her energy into controlling the neighborhood. Someone needs to run against her for the board." Dave laughed. "Good luck with that. She stacked the board with her friends. Linda Morrison and Karen Chambers do whatever Patricia says. The elections are a joke." I spent that night researching HOA law in North Carolina, reading through my bylaws with a fine-tooth comb and getting angrier by the minute. The more I read, the more I realize just how much power Patricia and the board had. They could approve projects, levy fines, and even put liens on properties. And according to the bylaws, any improvement project under $50,000 didn't require a community vote, just board approval. The next morning, I went out to survey the damage in daylight. The path was about halfway done, a line of neat flagstones cutting through what used to be my garden. Some of my plants were completely destroyed, but others had just been shoved aside. I looked closer and realized that many of the berry bushes, while disturbed, still had their root balls mostly intact. They were in the pile of debris, but they were alive. That's when I got the idea. I grabbed my truck keys and drove to Green Valley Nursery, a local garden center where I had bought most of my original plants. The owner, an older man named Ray, recognized me immediately. "Marcus, haven't seen you in a while. What brings you in?" I explained the situation while Ray listened, his expression growing darker. "Patricia Whitmore, huh? She came in here once, wanted us to give her a 25% discount because she was HOA president. I told her that's not how business works. She gave me a 1-star review online. Ray, I need your help. I want to salvage what I can and replant, but I need to do it fast before harvest." Ray scratched his chin. "Those bushes been yanked out of the ground." "Yeah, but some of them still look okay. Bring them here. I'll help you assess what we can save." "You'll need to act quick, though. The longer they are out of the ground, the worse their chances." I spent the rest of that day carefully extracting every salvageable plant from the debris pile. The crew working on the path looked at me like I was crazy, but they didn't stop me. I loaded everything into my truck and brought it to Ray's nursery. We spent hours going through each plant, trimming damaged roots, and getting them into temporary containers with good soil. This blueberry cultivar is a beauty, Ray said, examining one of my Chandler bushes. You did good work with these. Will they make it? If we keep them watered and out of shock, maybe. But Marcus, where are you going to plant them? I thought your whole patch was under that path now. Not the whole patch. There's about 10 feet on either side that they didn't touch. And I've got space along the side of my house. Ray nodded slowly. You know Patricia's going to throw a fit, right? She told you to limit your garden to 10 by 10. Let her try. I'm following her stupid rule. 10 by 10 on one side and ornamental landscaping everywhere else. Berries count as ornamental, right? They have pretty flowers, Ray grinned. I like the way you think. Over the next 3 days, I worked like a man possessed. The path crew finished their project, laying the last flagstones and sweeping sand into the joints. Once they were gone, I started replanting. I measured out exactly 10 feet by 10 feet in my backyard, right up against the fence line where I got good sun. That space got my most productive blueberry bushes and the strawberry patch. For the rest, I got creative. Berry bushes lined the side of my house, staggered to look like ornamental landscaping. I planted raspberries along the back fence, training them up like decorative vines. The blackberries went into large decorative planters that I positioned strategically around the patio. I used mulch, decorative stones, and even added some colorful annuals around the berries to make everything look intentional and aesthetically pleasing. Ray helped me source everything I needed at cost, and even came over one evening to help me install a drip irrigation system. This actually looks really good, he said, stepping back to admire our work. Better than before, honestly. Think Patricia will see it that way? Not a chance. I finished replanting on Sunday, exactly 1 week after the path crew had first shown up. My body ached, my hands were covered in blisters, and I had spent nearly $2,000 on soil, fertilizer, irrigation supplies, and new plants to fill in the gaps. But my berries were back in the ground, and they were already starting to perk up. Monday morning, I was drinking coffee on my back porch when I heard the telltale click of high heels on Flagstone. Patricia appeared on the new path, wearing white capris and a nautical striped shirt, like she was about to go sailing instead of harassing her neighbors. She stopped dead when she saw my replanted garden. What is this? Her voice could have cut glass. Morning, Patricia. Coffee, you were told to limit your food garden to 10 by 10. I gestured to the marked-out space by the fence. That's 10 by 10, measured it myself. And all of this. She waved her hand at the berry bushes along the house and fence. Ornamental landscaping. There's nothing in the bylaws that restricts ornamental plantings. Patricia's face was turning an impressive shade of red. Those are berry bushes. That's food production. They're flowering shrubs that happen to produce decorative fruit. Lots of ornamental plants produce berries. Holly, pyracantha, buteyberry. You know exactly what you're doing. Following the rules, Patricia, just like you told me to. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowed. The board is going to hear about this. I look forward to it. Patricia stormed off, her heels clicking rapidly on the flagstones. I watched her go, feeling pretty satisfied with myself. The satisfaction lasted about 3 days. On Thursday, I got a certified letter from the HOA. It was a notice of violation for unapproved landscaping modifications and attempting to circumvent board-approved restrictions. I was ordered to appear at the next board meeting on the following Tuesday to explain myself, and warned that failure to appear would result in immediate fines. I called Tom Richardson again. Can they do this? Tom sighed. Technically, yes. Major landscaping changes are supposed to be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Did you submit plans? For replanting bushes in my own yard. In an HOA, yeah, you're usually supposed to. Look, Go to the meeting. Be polite. Explain what you did and why. Maybe they'll back down. The following Tuesday evening, I walked into the clubhouse meeting room to find about 15 other homeowners already seated. Patricia sat at the head table with her board cronies, Linda Morrison and Karen Chambers. Linda was a thin woman with nervous hands who seemed perpetually afraid of Patricia. Karen, on the other hand, was Patricia's perfect lieutenant, a stocky woman with short-cropped hair and a permanent scowl. Patricia called the meeting to order and went through various boring HOA business about pool hours, parking permits, and upcoming events. Finally, she got to what she clearly considered the main event. Item 7 on the agenda: the unauthorized landscaping at 47 Meadowbrook Lane. She looked directly at me. "Marcus Freeman, would you like to explain why you deliberately violated the board's directives?" I stood up, keeping my voice calm. "I replanted berry bushes that were destroyed during the path construction. My food garden is now 10 by 10, exactly as specified. The other plantings are ornamental landscaping. Those are food-producing plants," Patricia snapped. "Lots of ornamental plants produce food. Should I cut down my crabapple tree too? What about the rose hips?" A few people in the audience chuckled. Patricia's face tightened. "This board has decided that your landscaping violates the spirit of the community guidelines. You have 30 days to remove all berry plants except those in the designated 10 by 10 area. I'd like to see the specific bylaw that says I can't have berry bushes as ornamental plants." Karen leaned forward. Section 18, Paragraph 4. All landscaping must maintain community aesthetic standards as determined by the Architectural Review Committee. That's pretty vague. Who decides what meets aesthetic standards? We do, Patricia said. That's our job as the board. An older gentleman in the back raised his hand. "I've got a question. I've got knockout roses that produce hips. My wife makes jam from them. Are those prohibited too?" Patricia looked irritated. "That's different." "How?" someone else asked. The meeting started to spiral as other homeowners brought up their own plants that produced edible parts. Patricia tried to maintain control, but it was clear she hadn't thought through the implications of her arbitrary rule. Finally, she called for a vote from the board on whether to fine me. All in favor of assessing a violation and fine against Marcus Freeman. Patricia and Karen raised their hands immediately. Linda hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "Linda," Patricia's voice was sharp. "I just think maybe we should revisit the specific language," Linda said quietly. "It does seem a bit unclear." "The language is perfectly clear. All in favor." Linda reluctantly raised her hand. The motion passes. "Marcus Freeman, you're hereby fined $100 per day starting 2 weeks from today if the unauthorized plantings aren't removed." I stood up again. "I want to see the Architectural Review Committee's written standards, and I want to formally appeal this decision." Patricia's smile was cold. "Appeals must be submitted in writing within 5 business days and will be reviewed by the same board." "So you're appealing to yourselves?" "That's how the bylaws work. If you don't like it, you're free to sell your house and move." I left the meeting furious. Several other homeowners stopped me in the parking lot, offering sympathy and support, but no one was willing to actually challenge Patricia. They were all too afraid of becoming her next target. That weekend, I did 2 things. First, I wrote up a detailed appeal with photographs, documentation of the bylaw language, and research on similar HOA cases. Second, I started a Facebook group called Meadowbrook Residents for Fair HOA Practices. I posted about my situation, including copies of all the notices I had received. Within 24 hours, 30 homeowners had joined the group. The stories started pouring in. Mrs. Jenkins had been fined for having the wrong shade of white on her mailbox. The Patel family had been harassed for parking their car on the street during a dinner party. Mike Rodriguez had been forced to repaint his shutters 3 times before Patricia approved the color. Every story followed the same pattern: Patricia finding some obscure bylaw violation and using it to bully people into compliance. The most disturbing story came from a woman named Beth Nelson. She and her husband had adopted a rescue dog that barked occasionally. Patricia had filed noise complaints with the county, sent violation notices, and made their lives so miserable that they ended up rehomming the dog. Beth was in tears as she typed out the story. "We loved that dog, but the daily fines were going to put us into debt. We had no choice." I realized Patricia wasn't just power-hungry. She was a bully who had been given legal authority to torment her neighbors. Monday morning, I received a response to my appeal. It was a single page. "Appeal denied. The board stands by its decision. You have 9 days remaining to comply." It was signed by all 3 board members. I called an attorney named Jennifer Park who specialized in HOA disputes. Her consultation fee was expensive, but I was done playing nice. Jennifer listened to my whole story, looked through my documents, and nodded. "You've got a decent case. The bylaw language is vague and they're applying it inconsistently. But I have to be honest with you, Marcus. HOA litigation is brutal. Even if you win, it could take years and cost tens of thousands of dollars. What are my options? You could pay the fines and remove the plants. You could sell and move, or you could fight, knowing it's going to be expensive and miserable." "What would you do?" Jennifer smiled slightly. "I'd never buy in an HOA in the first place, but if I were you, I'd look for any procedural violations they've made. HOAs have to follow their own rules. If Patricia and her board have been cutting corners, you might be able to invalidate some of their decisions." That gave me an idea. I went back through every document I could find from the past 2 years of board meetings. The HOA was required to post minutes within 30 days of each meeting, maintain certain records, and follow specific procedures for votes and rule changes. It took me 3 days of digging, but I found it. The walking path project had been approved at a March meeting. According to the posted minutes, all 3 board members were present and voted in favor. But I had been at that meeting. I remembered because it was the same meeting where they'd discussed the pool schedule for summer. Linda Morrison hadn't been there. She'd been out of town visiting her daughter. Karen had even mentioned it, joking about Linda missing the first warm day of spring. The path project had been approved by only 2 board members, not the required majority of 3. The entire project was invalid. I brought this to Jennifer's attention. She reviewed the minutes and cross-referenced them with the bylaws. "You're right. This project should never have moved forward. If only 2 board members voted, it doesn't meet the quorum requirement. So what do I do? You're going to send a very official letter explaining that you've discovered this violation and demanding that they rescind your fines. And you're going to threaten to sue if they don't." Jennifer drafted the letter, and I hand-delivered it to the HOA office. Patricia wasn't there, but I left it with the part-time secretary, making sure to get a signed receipt. 2 days later, my doorbell rang at 8 in the morning. Patricia stood on my porch, shaking with rage, my letter crumpled in her hand. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "Linda was at that meeting. The minutes say she wasn't. The minutes are wrong. Then correct them. Post an amended version with an explanation. But until you do, that project was approved illegally, which means all the violations stemming from it are invalid. You smug little man. Do you think you're clever? I think I'm a homeowner who's tired of being harassed." Patricia leaned in close. "You just made a very big mistake. I will make your life a living hell. Looking forward to it." She stormed off, and I closed the door, my heart pounding. I had just declared war on my HOA president, and there was no going back. Over the next week, I got violation notices for everything imaginable. My grass was allegedly too long, then too short. My garbage cans were visible from the street for 30 seconds while I wheeled them back from the curb. My car was parked at a slight angle in my driveway. Every notice came with a threat of fines. I documented everything, took time-stamped photographs, and posted it all to the Facebook group, which had now grown to over 60 members. Other people started posting their own petty violation notices. It became clear that Patricia was lashing out at everyone she suspected of supporting me. That's when Dave Chen came up with the idea for a recall election. According to the bylaws, if 20% of homeowners signed a petition, the board could be forced into a recall vote. The neighborhood had 142 homes, so we needed 29 signatures. We had 56 within 3 days. Patricia's response was to claim the petition was invalid due to improper formatting. Jennifer Park reviewed the bylaw and confirmed that there was no specified format. We submitted the petition again with a cover letter from Jennifer explaining that all legal requirements had been met. The board scheduled the recall vote for 6 weeks out, the maximum time allowed under the bylaws. During those 6 weeks, Patricia went on the offensive. She sent out a newsletter to all homeowners painting me as a troublemaker who was trying to destroy property values. She claimed that if the board was recalled, the neighborhood would descend into chaos with everyone doing whatever they wanted. But she had miscalculated. Too many people were tired of her tyranny. The Facebook group became an organizing hub. We held a meeting at Dave's house where 40 people showed up. We drafted a platform for new board candidates focused on transparency, fair enforcement, and treating homeowners like adults. 3 people agreed to run for the 3 board positions: Dave Chen, Beth Nelson, and a retired lawyer named Robert Foster. All 3 had been victims of Patricia's overreach. The campaign was nasty. Patricia and her supporters went door to door spreading rumors. Karen Chambers sent out an email blast claiming Dave was planning to eliminate all community standards. Linda Morrison posted on Nextdoor that Beth was unqualified and emotional, but we had the truth on our side, and we had documentation. For every lie Patricia's team told, we had evidence showing the pattern of harassment and abuse of power. The berry harvest started during the campaign. My bushes, despite the trauma of being uprooted and replanted, produced beautifully. I made it a point to bring fresh berries to everyone who had supported the recall effort. I made jam and distributed it at a neighborhood barbecue that Patricia wasn't invited to. My berries became a symbol of resistance. People posted pictures on social media of pies and smoothies made from freedom berries. It was silly and wonderful, and exactly what the neighborhood needed. The recall election was held on a Thursday evening in the clubhouse. Nearly 90 homeowners showed up, the largest turnout in the neighborhood's history. Patricia tried to control the proceedings, but Robert Foster, using his legal knowledge, kept everything proper and by the book. The vote wasn't even close. Patricia was recalled with 78% voting in favor. Karen got 72%. Linda actually garnered some sympathy votes, but still lost with 59% voting for recall. Dave, Beth, and Robert were elected to replace them with similar margins. Patricia's face as the results were announced was something I'd remember forever. The smug superiority was gone, replaced by shock and genuine confusion. She had never imagined that the people she'd controlled for so long would actually stand up to her. "This neighborhood is going to fall apart without proper leadership," she said, her voice shaking. "You'll all regret this." "I don't think so," Dave said calmly, "but thank you for your service." The new board's first action was to rescind all pending fines related to my berry bushes and to formally apologize for the overreach. Their second action was to establish clear, written standards for the architectural review process that would be publicly posted and consistently applied. Their third action was to conduct a financial audit of the HOA accounts. This was something the neighborhood had been requesting for years, but Patricia had always refused, claiming it was too expensive. The audit revealed something shocking. Over the past 3 years, Patricia had been approving payments to her brother's landscaping company for work that was either overpriced or never performed. The walking path project alone had cost $38,000, about double what similar projects should cost. Patricia's brother had billed for materials and labor that never happened. The total misappropriation was over $90,000. Dave immediately contacted the Chapel Hill Police Department. I was present when Detective Sarah Williams came to review the evidence. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had dealt with HOA fraud before. "It's more common than people think," she told us. "HOA boards handle a lot of money with limited oversight. When you get someone who sees it as their personal fiefdom, they start thinking they can do whatever they want." The investigation took 3 months. During that time, Patricia hired an expensive lawyer and tried to claim that the payments were legitimate, that her brother's company had provided quality service at fair market rates. But the evidence was overwhelming. Invoices for materials that were never delivered. Time sheets showing workers on site on days when multiple neighbors could prove no one was there. Contracts signed without competitive bids, violating the HOA's own procurement policies. The Flagstone path itself became evidence. An independent contractor evaluated it and determined that the materials used were contractor grade, not the premium materials Patricia's brother had billed for. The installation was also shoddy in places, with improper base preparation that meant the path would likely need major repairs within 5 years. In August, Patricia Whitmore and her brother, Daniel Whitmore, were arrested and charged with felony embezzlement and fraud. The story made the local news. I watched the segment with Dave and Beth, seeing Patricia do a perp walk in handcuffs, her face hidden behind her hair. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly I just felt tired. The whole thing had been exhausting. The legal fees, the stress, the constant conflict. I had spent more time fighting the HOA than I had enjoying my home. Was it worth it? Beth asked, as if reading my mind. "Yeah," I said. "I think it was." The criminal case moved slowly through the court system. Patricia's lawyer tried to get the charges reduced, arguing that HOA financial mismanagement was a civil matter, not criminal. But the prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres, built a compelling case showing deliberate fraud and conspiracy. During the discovery process, they found even more evidence. Patricia had also been diverting small amounts from the HOA's reserve fund into a personal account, $500 here, $1,000 there. Over time, it added up to another $23,000. I was called to testify at the preliminary hearing. The defense attorney, a slick guy in an expensive suit, tried to make me look like a disgruntled homeowner with a grudge. "Isn't it true, Mr. Freeman, that you were upset about the removal of your unauthorized garden?" My garden wasn't unauthorized, and yes, I was upset that the HOA destroyed 3 years of work without proper notice or compensation. Upset enough to fabricate evidence against Miss Whitmore. I didn't fabricate anything. The financial records speak for themselves. "You led a campaign to have Miss Whitmore removed from the board, didn't you?" "I supported a legal recall election because the board was abusing its authority." The defense attorney tried to paint the whole case as a vindictive neighbor dispute, but the financial evidence was too strong. The preliminary hearing judge found sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Patricia's trial began the following spring. I attended several days of testimony. The prosecution brought in forensic accountants who walked the jury through the fraudulent transactions. They showed how Patricia had approved payments to her brother's company without proper documentation, how materials were billed but never used, how labor costs were inflated. Daniel Whitmore had already taken a plea deal and testified against his sister. He claimed Patricia had approached him with the scheme, promising they'd split the profits. His testimony was damning. She told me the HOA had plenty of money and that homeowners never paid attention to the budget, Daniel said from the witness stand. She said as long as we kept the amounts reasonable and spread them out, no one would notice. Patricia's defense was that she had trusted her brother to do good work and hadn't realized he was overcharging. She claimed she was a victim too. But the prosecution produced emails between Patricia and Daniel discussing specific ways to inflate invoices and hide their tracks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. They found Patricia guilty on 7 counts of embezzlement, 3 counts of fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy. Her brother had already been sentenced to 4 years in prison. Patricia was sentenced to 6 years. The sentencing hearing was surreal. Patricia, who had always been so put together and intimidating, stood before the judge looking diminished and defeated. Her lawyer made an impassioned plea for leniency, talking about her years of community service and claiming she'd made mistakes, but didn't deserve prison. Judge Anthony Richardson wasn't swayed. "Miss Whitmore, you held a position of trust within your community. Your neighbors relied on you to manage their resources responsibly. Instead, you stole from them systematically and deliberately over several years. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was calculated theft. The court sentences you to 6 years in the North Carolina correctional system, with credit for time served, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. You're also ordered to pay full restitution to the Homeowners Association in the amount of $113,000. Patricia was led away in handcuffs. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that it was over, satisfaction that she'd been held accountable, but also a strange sadness. She'd had the opportunity to be a positive force in the neighborhood, to actually serve the community. Instead, she'd let power and greed corrupt her. The HOA received a settlement from Patricia's homeowner's insurance, which covered about 60% of the stolen funds. The neighborhood voted to assess a one-time special levy to cover the rest and to rebuild the reserve fund. Everyone paid their share without complaint. There was a sense that we were all in it together now, working to repair what Patricia had broken. The new board, with Dave still serving as president, implemented major reforms. All contracts over $5,000 now required competitive bids from multiple vendors. Financial statements were posted monthly online. Board meetings were recorded and archived. Architectural review standards were clearly written and consistently applied. More importantly, the culture changed. The board started approaching homeowners as partners rather than subjects. When issues came up, there were conversations rather than violation notices. The neighborhood felt like a community again. My berry patch thrived. The bushes I'd rescued and replanted adapted to their new locations and produced even better than before. The harvest that second year was incredible. I made jam, froze berries for winter, and shared freely with neighbors. The raspberries along the fence became a neighborhood attraction, with kids stopping by during berry season to see if they could sneak a few. The Flagstone path, ironically, became quite useful. People used it for morning walks and evening strolls. Kids rode bikes on it. Once we stopped associating it with Patricia's tyranny, it was actually a nice community feature. The new board hired a reputable contractor to fix the shoddy installation work, using some of the recovered funds. Life gradually returned to normal, or rather, to a new and better normal. I could work in my garden without looking over my shoulder. I could make improvements to my house without worrying about arbitrary violation notices. I could live in my home without feeling like I was under surveillance. About a year after Patricia's sentencing, I was out in the garden on a Saturday morning when Linda Morrison walked by on the path. I hadn't seen her much since the recall. She had moved to a condo across town shortly after the election. "Marcus," she said, stopping awkwardly. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Sure." She stepped off the path, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize for everything with the board. I knew Patricia was being unreasonable, but I was too afraid to stand up to her, and I should have. I'm sorry. I hadn't expected that." "Thanks, Linda. That means something. I've thought a lot about it over the past year, about how I let fear turn me into someone I didn't like. I voted to fine you for having berry bushes, for God's sake." "How ridiculous is that?" "Pretty ridiculous," I agreed. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you fought back. And I'm glad the neighborhood has real leadership now." She looked at the garden. "Your berries look amazing." "Thanks. Want to take some home?" We filled a container with fresh blueberries and raspberries. Linda thanked me again and continued on her walk. It was a small moment, but it felt like closure. That summer, the neighborhood held its first community garden day. We cleared an empty lot at the end of the neighborhood and turned it into a shared garden space with raised beds available to anyone who wanted to grow vegetables, herbs, or flowers. Beth spearheaded the project, saying she wanted to create something positive from all the conflict over my berries. The community garden became incredibly popular. Families worked plots together. Neighbors who had barely spoken before bonded over tomato varieties and squash beetles. People shared seeds, tools, and advice. It became a gathering place, especially in the evenings when people would come to water and wade and chat. I volunteered to teach a berry-growing workshop. 20 people showed up, eager to learn about soil pH, winter chill requirements, and pruning techniques. It was one of the most satisfying days I'd had in years, sharing knowledge with people who were genuinely interested. Dave served 3 years as HOA president before deciding not to run for re-election. He'd done what he set out to do, and he was ready to step back. A younger couple, the Martinez family, ran for the board with fresh ideas about sustainability and community building. They won easily. The new board continued the reforms Dave had started and added their own innovations. They established a hardship fund to help homeowners who were struggling financially. They created a neighborhood newsletter that actually focused on bringing people together rather than listing violations. They organized regular community events that felt genuine rather than mandatory. 3 years after the path was built, after my berries were ripped out and replanted, after Patricia was arrested and convicted, after the neighborhood was transformed, I stood in my backyard during harvest season and took stock. My berry bushes were mature and productive. The garden was beautiful. The neighborhood was peaceful. Ray from the nursery stopped by to see how everything was doing. He walked through the garden, examining plants with a professional eye, nodding with approval. "You did good, Marcus. These bushes look healthier than before. Thanks for all your help. I couldn't have done it without you. You would have figured it out. You're stubborn enough." He grabbed a handful of blackberries and popped them in his mouth. "Delicious. What are you going to do with all these?" I've got orders for 20 jars of jam already. The rest I'll freeze or give away. Ever think about selling them? You could probably get a farmer's market permit. I had thought about it, actually. But then I remembered all the stress and conflict of the past few years and decided I didn't need the hassle. Nah, I grow them because I enjoy it. Making it into a business would ruin that. Ray understood. We spent the afternoon harvesting together, filling flats with perfect berries. As the sun started to set, I saw families walking on the Flagstone path, kids riding bikes, neighbors stopping to chat. The path that had started as a symbol of overreach and abuse of power had become what it was supposed to be all along, something that brought the community together. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondering how she was doing in prison. Whether she'd learned anything or if she just felt like a victim of circumstances, I'd probably never know. She'd be eligible for parole in a few years, but I doubted she'd return to the neighborhood. There was nothing left for her here. The whole experience taught me things I hadn't expected to learn when I bought a house in an HOA community. I learned that power corrupts even in small, suburban ways. I learned that standing up to bullies is exhausting but necessary. I learned that most people are good and decent, but they need someone to be brave first before they'll join in. I also learned that I was more resilient than I thought, that I could fight for what mattered to me and win, even when the system seemed rigged against me. That community is worth fighting for, and that sometimes destruction leads to something better than what was there before. My berry patch had been destroyed and rebuilt, and it was better for it. The neighborhood had been fractured and reformed, and it was stronger for it. Sometimes things need to break before they can be fixed properly. On a warm evening in late summer, the neighborhood held a harvest festival in the community garden. People brought food made from their garden produce. There were tomato salads, zucchini bread, herb roasted vegetables, and about a dozen different berry desserts made from my fruit. Kids ran around playing while adults sat in lawn chairs talking and laughing. Dave found me by the berry tart table and handed me a beer. "Remember when you thought you'd have to move?" I was seriously considering it. "Glad you didn't. This place wouldn't be the same without you and your berries." "It was never really about the berries, though, was it?" Dave shook his head. "No. It was about standing up to someone who thought her authority meant she could do whatever she wanted. You just happened to do it over berry bushes." Beth joined us, her daughters trailing behind eating cookies. "We should make this an annual thing. The Harvest Festival." "Already planning next year's?" I asked. "That's what board members do. We plan things." She grinned. "The difference is now we plan things people actually want." As the evening wore on and the fireflies came out, I sat with my neighbors and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. Not just with my garden or my house, but with the community itself. We'd been through something difficult together and come out better on the other side. The next morning I was back in the garden early, checking on the late-season raspberries. The Flagstone path was quiet, just a few early morning joggers passing by. One of them, a young guy who'd moved in recently, stopped to catch his breath. "Morning," he said. "Those berries look incredible." "Thanks, been working on them for a while." "I heard there was some big drama about them a few years back," I smiled. "Yeah, you could say that. Must have been stressful." "It was, but it worked out in the end." He nodded and continued his run. I turned back to my raspberries, thinking about everything that had happened. The destruction and rebuilding, the conflict and resolution, the fear and courage. It had been one of the hardest experiences of my life, but I wouldn't trade it. I had fought for something that mattered, stood up when it would have been easier to back down, and helped change a community for the better. And I had my berries back, thriving and productive. a living reminder that sometimes the best thing you can do is rip out what's broken and rebuild it right.